How's everyone doing this morning? Thanks for showing up and actually being here. Everything show up there okay? Yes. So I'm going to be speaking quickly about the California v6 Task Force. For most of you who are in the room that live in California, this is applicable to you. That all of you that don't live in California, it's still applicable to you, just in a slightly different way. So part of the involvement for the v6 Task Force, the agenda we're going to do today is talk quickly about what we do introduction-wise, where do we fit into the bigger picture, who makes up the task force itself, what's our purpose, and basically how can you get involved if you are so inclined. So in the bigger picture of things, we actually are part of what's called the North American v6 Task Force, and while there's no actual formal entity as a North American v6 Task Force, it's a loose coalition of all the crazy task forces that are operational around the rest of the United States. So under that umbrella, we're actually part of the IPv6 forum and work under that entity. It's sort of funny because there's not a lot of legal structure that goes around this. It's just a bunch of crazy people getting in a room and declaring ourselves task force and operationally working. So those people that decide to volunteer and get something working within the geographies, that's how it works. Hawaii has one set up, California has one set up, Rocky Mountain, and just so people know and understand there are more than just this event that actually goes on around the country. The Rocky Mountain event is actually going to be, I guess I can formally say this, it's going to be getting renamed to the North American event. It is the biggest event that happens in North America, and as part of sort of the decision-making process, there's going to be a shift of renaming that the sort of North American sort of premier event that happens in April. Texas has a very good established group, and actually Mexico has a very well-established group too. And the Canadian group, while there are a ton of crazy Canadians running around doing V6, the actual Canadian V6 Task Force group is actually not active right now, so which is a shame. And then just recently, the Southeast group was just formed. Dave Rule is actually running that one and is doing a great job with that, so we appreciate actually getting something going there. These are actually the logo sets for all those sort of areas for people who have interest. And if this covers your geography, then I suggest you reach out and get in touch with them. So in process, the Northwest, Yuri Rich with IPv6 is actually getting the Northwest group kicked off from a legal entity standpoint. And if you're in the Northwest and want to participate, feel free to reach out to Yuri. His information is up here. In the Midwest, we don't really have a lot of coverage. There was some interesting stuff coming out of Kansas, but at this point in time, we don't really have anything Midwest coverage. Southeast, Dave's contact information is up here, and these decks will be available, so not a problem. You don't have to write it down. So who runs in California? George Usi, who's actually the chair and has been involved with the task force since 2005, I believe, for California. He's one of the original founders for the California Task Force, along with Jim Bound and a few others. Myself, Jeff Lambert, who's sort of a member at large because he was around during the old days when things were being established. And then Brandon Carroll, who's actually the co-chair who handles the LA area. So I don't know how many folks are familiar with Brandon, but he's quite involved in sort of training and education. So he works for Escolta and develops quite a bit of IPv6 training materials. So if you're in the LA area, that's coverage. We are looking for folks if you're in the San Diego area and want to get involved. We're definitely interested in, it's tough enough just having 4 or 5 individuals that are trying to cover the state. If you're interested and want to be involved, more than happy to have you. This is my information. So the website is v6 enabled. It would be rather embarrassing if it wasn't, which for the longest time it wasn't. And so it is v6 enabled. So one of the useful things for yourself and your customers is actually, and something I think of value, is that on the site, if you're going via v4, the little turtle up there is not swimming. And in fact, you don't get to see this picture of the turtle with his head turned towards you. He's only looking off to the right. So if you're a v4 content only, you don't get to see the swimming turtle, and it shows you that you're connected with a v4 address. If you actually connect with v6, you actually get to see the swimming turtle, and you actually get to see your full v6 address. Why did we do this? For a very simple reason. For those folks that are actually trying to test and get a quick assessment, am I on a v6 network and can I connect to the public v6 internet? If you saw the swimming turtle, you knew you were good to go. Really very fast, very simplistic test to allow people to understand where they sort of sit in that area. It's a tip of the hat to the gogoNET folks in Japan in terms of they were really the first site to do this and make it publicly available. So that's my information. Twitter, California V6 Task Force is on Twitter. I happen to be on Twitter too, but everything that you see posted out there is usually coming from myself or from Brandon. So who makes up the task force? It's basically you. It's volunteers that are willing to spend the time and effort to do things. Those folks that are unfortunate enough to know me on a personal basis, that I drag you down with me in this process. I ask for a lot of people to volunteer and put effort in, and we do a certain amount of outreach. I drag Sam back there in and say, I want you to bring your students down and make them learn V6, and it's stuff like that that makes things happen. So the purpose is, the purpose of the task force are these principles. It's advocacy. It's basically, really talking about and promoting V6 as a general rule. Education, so it's events like these, conferences like these, local meetings that we're willing to put some weight behind, white papers and labs. So the last two items are really what I wanted to address for the group here was the white papers and labs. Since we have direct vendors who are involved in the room, having a repository, with, whether it's up on the California V6 Task Force site or providing link sets that we can aggregate together to point to reference materials for V6 is something that we would like to be able to provide as a resource, and also be able to allow those folks to reference back to us. And this includes university institutions. So Sam, your stuff that you have up, some very interesting, if you want a chance to see some interesting exploits and other items that Sam works on the V6 side, that's really sort of cool, and we'll probably be linking up to those. But we'd also like to get some white papers published that we can collaborate with, that individuals want to actually spend some time putting together and then publishing up sort of as a, maybe under a Creative Commons license under the task force site would be wonderful. And then evangelism. So I do have stickers available for those that, yeah, and quite a few folks have them on their laptops here. I appreciate that, and feel free to grab them. There is no formal membership in the task force. We are talking about potentially doing something more established. I will give you an update about where we sit on the legal standing side. We're going to be submitting our paperwork formally here shortly. It takes quite a bit of effort actually to get a nonprofit spun up from a legal standpoint properly, and so we're in process for doing that. Right now we just exist as a web URL and a bunch of people running around putting the effort together. The task force has been around for quite a long time, since 2006, 2005 is really when things formally kicked off. I was first involved with it in about 2006. And it's something that we stuck with for a long time. So evangelism is one of the things that we work on the V6 side. So how can you get involved? So obviously attending IPv6 events, you're here, so that's half the battle for me. Host local IPv6 events. So one of the things that's the biggest challenge for the task force is the fact that we're so distributed, California is so large, that trying to host events across California on a regular basis from a financial perspective, since we don't have any formal funding, is actually rather difficult. And so looking to individuals in the room and obviously reaching out and saying we'd like to host and even have the task force behind events that either vendors are sponsoring, that local user groups are sponsoring and doing. We're happy to provide content where we can. We're happy to provide relationships where we can for speakers and presenters. That's something that we're more than ready to do. But it really depends on local events happening on a local basis. I know for a fact Blue Cat Networks has been doing a roadshow. I know Infoblox has a roadshow that's planned to be kicked off to do V6 specific items. I know there are several other companies that are doing things of that nature. More than happy to help push those along and actually advertise those up on the task force site, in addition to putting our logo set behind it to help. Writing the technical white papers, hosting local IPv6 labs. So once again, Lewis, I'm throwing you under the bus and saying that I'd like to get the Silicon Valley Cisco users group to get some gear up and be hosting there. The task force itself actually has space available up in Sacramento that we're going to be moving into Raging Wire for folks who want to do some independent testing on native V6. We will probably be making some facilities available there. And then In addition, volunteering, if you're interested in helping out, we're going to be forming some steering committees that are specific around doing events, specific around producing white papers, and specific around helping local regional events happen. So we're looking for volunteers for that. So this is a bit of my get to talk about what's going to be happening further down the line. So if there's no planning on the V6 side, you can sort of see what's coming down the road. And really the point of the task force is to get people to start thinking about it and to start planning, right? The evangelism part is saying that you need to pay attention. And my little bit of contribution is to try and stand up and say, hey, you guys are the first ones in line. You have to stand up and actually tap your colleagues on the shoulder. You know, I know Robert's doing this quite a bit within Cisco, and tapping all the rest of the SEs on the shoulder and say, you need to start paying attention. You need to start educating yourself. You need to start educating your customers, right, about how important it is to transition to V6. The only way you're going to get the education, the only way you're going to find out this information is showing up to events like this. My prediction, and I have a personal feeling about this, is that 2012, 2013, you're going to see conferences like this that are happening across the world, and the attendance is going to skyrocket. For the simple reason that people lack skill set, people lack knowledge about what's happening with V6, and while those of us that have been on the early forefront of really talking about it on a long basis, Sylvia back there has suffered through more smaller conferences as you probably imagine. But the reality is that instead of practical people who are trying to implement over and over again the same structural deficits from V4 to V6, you're now getting to the point where people are realizing they actually have to get it implemented and are trying to find out information about how to do it. So instead of a bunch of protocol folks sitting around saying, how are we going to get something built that we can actually do, you know, take this RFC and actually practically build something, it's now moving from, it's already practically built, how do I actually deploy it? And with that, I'd like to thank all these folks for putting on and helping us with this event, and Bruce specifically. And then if anyone has any questions about the task force, I'm happy to take any questions offline. I'm sort of sitting in the back and running back and forth, dealing with things here, but I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have questions about other task force or other areas, happy to address that. I also help with the North American V6 Task Force in terms of setting up the WebEx and regular meetings that we have monthly for that. So if you have any questions about the North American one, happy to do that too. Other than that, thank you. You all know which pill to take, all right? And that covers it.